Hello, welcome to the next round of top 10 videos. The new set just finished. So MKM, Karlov's Manor, just finished. So I have the top 10 cards for Pioneer. Also have some couple honorable mentions. So no further ado, let's get into them. If you like my content here, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe. Let me know down in the comment section what cards were your favorite. And let's get into the honorable mentions and get in the top 10. So, honorable mentions is Deduce. This card could potentially show up in decks like Creativity. Now, outside of that, I'm not sold that this card is going to do a lot in the format, but it's kind of like a better Think Twice, and also makes a clue token, which, like I said, which works well with Creativity. I'm not really sold that this is going to do a lot. It could show up in some sort of control shell if it wants it, but I don't think blue-white control has that many bad options for card draw and stuff like that. I think that's only for Creativity. Sharp-Eyed Rookie. Now, this card would have been in my top 10, but I'm not sold that it's going to be good enough to make the final cuts with Hardened Scales. I am going to be trying it out this season. And the issue is, how often are you playing a creature that's bigger than 2 power? So how often can this card actually get its ability to trigger? Now, it does have Vigilance, which is a upside against something like Wandering Emperor. But at the same time, it's 2 mana, so it does get got by Temporary Lockdown and Path of Peril. So that's kind of a net negative to the card, but I still actively want to try it. I think it could be a decent card overall. It's just, even though at worst case, it's just a slightly better bear, right? A 2/2 for 2 with Vigilance. So I'm not sold, but I still want to mention it. It could see some play in Pioneer, and I would keep an eye out for it. Let's get into the next round of honorable mentions. Next is Analyze the Pollen. 1 green. You may basically eat 8 mana value worth of cards from your graveyard or higher. If you do, you basically get to tutor any creature or land you want. If you don't, you get a basic land. I do like the fact that it is, quote unquote, a actual land tutor, right? It doesn't say basic. If you do the evidence 8, you could get a utility land, your primary land, like maybe Sunken Citadel, which is quite powerful in certain decks, or it can get your Greasefang, right? And ironically, the evidence 8 is the cost of Parhelion 2, so if you could spare one in your graveyard, you can get Greasefang. The other card, Case of the Lock. Overall, I'm kind of interested in this card. I know it looks more like a commander card, just because it's ramp. It's probably a reasonable card for that. But where I do actively want to try this card out at is in Gates. Gates, now with Splunking, really kind of wants to have extra land drops. Now, what is the best card to give you that? That's up for debate. I tried Dryad of the Ilson Grove, but I really don't like it on a creature. Now, what I like about this is if once you get to 7 lands, it does get solved. And then you can start casting Guild Summons off the top of your library. We also play Splunky. We also play this. So there's a decent amount of enchantments that you naturally already play in Gates. Plus, you have your Gates itself. So, and with Guild Summit, and of course in this, together, it kind of works like a little bit like a combo. Plus, you get to double mazes in a given turn if you have Splunking. Those are some powerful synergies that I really kind of want to try. I'm only going to try 2 copies because it is 4 mana, but I do actively want to try it. And it's better than the other alternative, which is like Druid Class, which is a 2 mana thing. Basically, it probably would just get got by Temporary Lockdown match 1, which is a bad thing. So overall, both these cards are very interesting. Ironically, both are green. Let's get into the next set of honorable mentions. So Delaney, Streetwise Lookout. 2 and a white, 2/2. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures power 3 or greater. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers additional time. Brutal Cathar, there's tons of different humans overall that have like interesting ETB effects. So it could show up as a 1 of, 2 of tops. I don't see it ever wanting to be more than that, because on rate, it's not that great, right? and you're kind of clunky already at the 3-drop slot. So that's why it's an honorable mention slot. Overall, I'm not sold if it's actually going to see any play. If there happens to be like an Elish Norn, Delaney deck that comes up out of this, maybe. Because most of the ETB good effects do have less than 2 power. And Yorion could help close the game out anyways. Maybe it shows up there, but even then it's a legend, so you don't really want a lot of the copies of it. So the other card is Intrude on the Mind, 3 in blue. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library, separate them in 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of them, put the other in your hand, put that pile into your hand, and the other in the graveyard, and create a XX with +1/+1 counters equal to the number of cards put into your graveyard. It's 5 mana. I'm not sold this is actually going to be good enough, right? We already have Memory Deluge, which I think is just a better card than this. And I don't really actually see them wanting to be able to have the Thopter token. Now, I guess where this could show up, actually, is like Deduce. This could show up in a Control Creativity show that actively wants the Thopter token to be able to creativity it away. So maybe that is the upside of this card over something like Memory Deluge. But the difference between 4 mana to make sure you have your 5-drop land and a 5-drop is very big, actually, in my opinion, right? Normally, what I've always seen was Memory Deluge comes down on turn 4. Make sure you hit your next land drop because you really want to get to Teferi. And that's more important than this actually is. So maybe this shows up where the token matters more. And I think that could be where this possibly could shine. Maybe alongside Gear Hulk is a better choice, right? Because Gear Hulk in general, Memory Deluge, I don't believe wouldn't work with it because it does say how much mana you spent on it. If you don't spend any mana on it, it doesn't work. So this might be better with Gear Hulk, which in turn could mean that it's Gear Hulk Creativity, which is a more of a control shell type creativity deck. May actually want this card. We have one more set of honorable mentions before we get into the top 10. Let's get into it. Now, the last set of honorable mentions is Breakout and Fugitive Codebreaker. What holds back the card on the left is 2 things. For one, if this was a Goblin Wizard, it would immediately see play in Pioneer, right? I do think this is a great card for Standard, right? Overall, a 2-mana 2/2 with Prowess and Haste. Is this actively better? The trade-off for losing Flying and 1 power with the extra toughness, is this better than that? Because we do have a 2-mana 1/3 with Haste and Prowess and Flying. So actually I think that card is better, especially since it's also a wizard, which helps with Lightning Bolt or Wizard Bolt. If this was a wizard, that's a different story. It would actually see a lot of play because the factors is that wizard is a very important creature type with Wizard's Retort and Wizard's Lightning. The other net negative to this card is the cloak mechanic. I'm a firm believer that this mechanic is actually not constructed playable. Unless somehow you have 4 or 5 mana already, then you might be able to play it face down and immediately flip it. Outside of that, like, this mechanic is actively bad for constructed play. Wizards, if you would have made it a little bit better, I think it could have been, actually a decent mechanic. Overall, I think if you just didn't care about the ward and you just made it kind of just 2 mana for a 2/2 bear, face down, colorless bear, that would have been a better move and made it more constructed playable. But at 3 mana for a 2/2, that has no evasion is kind of insane. I get it has Ward 2, and that doesn't really matter because it's not a threat. And I mean, what are you doing with it? You're also taking a whole turn off of that on turn 3 when you could be playing Fable and the Mirror Breaker. You could be playing Bone Crusher Giant. Anything that's better than this. So if it was 2 mana, we might be able to talk, right? Because a 2 mana 2/2 face down that has a lot of upside could be actually playable. But 3 mana, it's just too expensive. Now, the other card is Breakout. Now, this card I think is actually kind of cool. And weirdly enough, they're on the same slide for a reason. So Breakout, I think, is at its best in a prowess shell, right? So you actively want to get non-creature spells to be able to sprock prowess, but at the same time, you kind of want to commit more threats to the board to be able to kill faster. And this kind of achieves both, right? It's a non-creature spell that triggers prowess. It gets you a prowess creature, gives it haste, and smacks. So this kind of screams a prowess card only. I can't imagine, unless Atarka Red rebuilds its entire strategy and deck to be able to accomplish this. I don't see it, because it's kind of nice having 3-drops like Godric and stuff like that, because Lockdown is a big deal in the format. Overall, a lot stronger than it is in Standard, because of course Pioneer is very mana efficient in general. So I do think this card is perfect for a prowess deck, and it's a lot better than even a card like, you know, the ban card, EI, Expressive Iteration. I think this card is even better than Expressive Iteration for the purpose of prowess, because it accomplishes 2 things that a prowess deck actually wants: more threats and a prowess sprock. So that's quite powerful. That is the end of our honorable mentions. Let's get into the top 10 and break them down. Now, number 10 on my list is a speculative pick, Case of the Crimson Pulse. 2 and a red, ETBs, discard a card, draw 2. If you have no cards in your hand, you can move it to solve. And at the beginning of your upkeep, discard your hand and draw 2 cards. This and another card later on, I think, could show up in one deck that I know of. Outside of that, this also, of course, can show up in Burn or Mono Red, because it does allow you to play this even with something like having Awaposh as a companion. It still fits the mold for that even. But again, something like Control or something like that, where you want card advantage to make sure that when they kill your threats and you run out of burn spells, you have an alternative way to keep pushing damage through. And 3 mana, again, is nice because temporary lockdown. So a lot of the cards in red actively are, 2 mana or less, because you want to be aggressive and aggro. And in the scenarios where you want a card like this, you're kind of actively trying to reduce your speed a little bit just to make sure you have, a more consistent plan of getting that last points of damage. So overall, I think this is a sweet card for Mono Red in general. So I'm excited about that. And if there's any other cards that you think are decks that may want this card, let me know down in the comment section. And of course, the other deck that I was thinking of is Fires of Invention. This card lets you dig for fires. After fires have been resolved, you do kind of deplete your hand relatively fast, just because you are casting 2 free spells in a given turn. And it's nice to be able to have another 3-drop, kind of like Fable the Mirror Breaker, but not as strong. So I am actively this season going to be trying this card out in Fires of Invention, and another card in the future that I'm going to discuss. So let's get into number 9 on my list. Number 9 is a little bit of a safe pick. Pick your poison. It's green. Choose 1. Each opponent sacks an artifact or an enchantment or a creature with flying. We already have a decent card that I've played throughout, like in seasons past, where I used to wish for the one that was 1 green, target player sacrifices a creature with flying. This just replaces it. So, as far as I'm considering, this card will show up in Modern, possibly Pioneer as well. And also Standard. It's a very efficient removal spell. And Atraxa is a huge hitter in Standard and Pioneer. So overall, I think this card is going to be really wonderful in the formats. So I would pick up a copy or 2 for your sideboard. This is definitely going to be worth the pickup. Let's get into number 8 on my list. Crime Novelist. 2 in a red, 1/3. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on him and add a red. This is combo potential. Unlike Amalia, this card is not as straightforward. right? Because Somali, you immediately knew, hey, this does good with life gain and explorer mechanic. That's it. This, on the other hand, is going to be very tricky to build, just due to the pure nature that we have not had this kind of deck in the format at all. There is some very interesting payoffs that, you know, you can sacrifice artifacts for free. So you can definitely infinitely combo with this card, but as I said, it's not as cut and dry. You have to be able to actually try to brew this list from scratch. I'm going to try to brew it. It's going to be very tricky for me to figure out the exact numbers. If you have any considerations about what you would consider in this list, let me know down in the comment section. There's definitely stuff like the Intruder, which is a 1 in a red. It's kind of like the old school ATOGs, where you could just sacrifice artifacts, make it bigger, and you could finish them off with a thud at the very end. That's a possibility to go down. But at the same time, like, you need some way of making infinite treasures, clues, or something like that. There's definitely the thing that makes servos, right? You can keep making infinite servos with this, the Intruder, and then you just, at the very end, the last red, you just thud the Intruder, and that should win the game. But I want to know other possibilities. If you, like I said, let me know in the comment section what cards you would consider for this list, because I want to build an ideal set of, you know, a perfect 75. Of course, I'm thinking about running some numbers of Coco, just because it can find this. It can't find the artifact. Maybe Word of Invention's out. Maybe it's better to go blue with Word of Invention. But then again, that can't find this. So I don't know. It's definitely an interesting card. Let's get into number 7 on my list. So number 7 is another card that I think could be very good in Fires of Invention. What really lacks in the deck, right, is the early game, which is, you know, very important in any given deck. This actually facilitates it. And what I like about it, it's also an investigation. So you do make a clue, which makes perfect sense in Fires, right? Because you're not really spending mana on the actual card you cast. So being able to just green and a blue, ramp, make a clue, then the following turn you play Fires on turn 3, then you can drop down Kellen as well, so that all checks out. Turn 4, if you don't really want to attack with Kellen to sack it to draw a card that way, you could just pay the mana that you're not going to use anyways. And of course, like I said, this would be more of a teamer list, so you can still play the Red Cavalier, which is quite powerful in general. So I'm excited about trying this list out. It's definitely going to be on my poll this season. And if you want to see this list, make sure you join my Discord in the description below and let me know that you want to vote, and I will give you permission to vote. I do think this card is actually quite amazing in general for Fires of Invention. Now, if there ever happens to be a Simic base ramp deck with Growth Spiral plus this, that is a nice possibility in the future. This is definitely better, of course, than the Worm that we got back in Wilds of Eldraine. That was basically, you know, me play additional land this turn, and it was a 5/4 with reach, I believe. This is definitely better than that, so I'm excited about trying it out. If you have any other suggestions what homes you think this card could show up in, let me know down in the comment section. Let's get into number 6 on my list. Number 6 is Azrag the Quake Mole. 2 red and a green. Mole God, 8/4. When it becomes blocked, you may untap each creature you control after this combat phase. There's an additional combat phase. You may pay 3 red, green, green. This guy must be blocked during each combat if able. There's a few possibilities with this card, right? Immediately, I think Gruul Midrange is immediately going to try this card. We already played Reckless Stormseeker, so giving this thing haste and attacking on turn 4 or on turn 3, right? If you play Elf, Stormseeker, this on turn 3, swing, and you kind of have, 9 plus 2, 11 power on turn 3. So that's not too shabby. And if they block this, then of course you get an extra combat phase. So I do like it in that deck. It works quite well in the deck just because it does play Huntsman's Redemption. So it can easily sack an elf and get this. And the other thing that I think this card could show up in, and 2 other cards, decks possibility. 1, there is a Gruul Scapeshift list that plays gods. So if this is actually a playable god on curve, it might actually show up there just because it's looking for more gods that are actually competitive. Of course, bar class. I'm not sure. It definitely likes to be having beat sticks. So it can get haste immediately the turn that you combo off. Which, and then again, I mean, I guess the extra combats don't really matter, right? Just because you're probably going to win anyways because you are swinging most likely with like 7 creatures and it's kind of devastating. Also, this card is quite good with Hajar, which is already in the bar class deck. So I do think this card is actually good in both of all 3 of those decks possibility. If you find any other home for this card, make sure you let me know in the comment section. And like I said, don't forget to put down there what was your favorite card of the set, because I want to actively know, so that way I know what cards I should brew around for this season. Of course, a lot of these top 10 ones, of course, except for number 2, I probably am going to try to brew. I think it's number 2. It's one of the top 3. So let's get into number 5 on my list. Krinkos Buzz Crusher. 2 and red. Artifact creature, Insectopter, flying, trample, 4/4. Already medium stats. It is playable. And what else do you get? When ETBs for each player, you destroy up to 1 non-basic land that player controls. It does not target, so Lotus Field, hexproof. It gets around it, so that's quite interesting, especially since you can get this down on turn 3 and blow up the Lotus Field. And then each player, of course, that had their land destroyed, you can go tutor for a basic land put into play tapped. If there's ever a land that becomes printed that actively wants to be destroyed, then this would be a nice way to enable it. But otherwise, you could always just destroy your Urborg and get a swamp, because you don't want to turn your opponent's lands, I guess, into swamps. So that's the thing, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. Or I guess you could just actively turn your Field of Ruins into another basic, which I wouldn't recommend, because the more land destruction, the better. I know, I probably got hundreds of people commenting down below, like, why are you a land destruction player? I've always been. Panza, here we come this season. Of course, I think next week there will be a video dropping that is Panza, so keep that in mind. I'm excited about retrying that deck again next season, and a few other types, ways of building it to find the best version of Panza. Let's get number 4 on my list. Lightning Helix. A red and a white. 3 damage to any target. You gain 3 life. Oh my god, it's Lightning Helix! Of course. This card sees play. It's always been really strong, so like there's not really a lot to say about it. It's definitely a huge step up from the lightning strikes that we get. The 3 life does plays a huge part in the game of Magic. And of course, I'm going to be featuring this on the first week of the season. And Burn, also with Giants, because I do think it's about time we start brushing off that tribe. I think it has a lot of potential. And the best version I've ever built was Jeskai, and it had Lightning Helix for Historic. So now I'm going to try it out in Pioneer and see how that works out. We do have a decent amount of removal with Bone Crusher Giant, Lightning Helix. So I'm actively excited about that. If there's another list that you would consider for this card, let me know down in the comment section. But there's a decent amount of decks, I think, featuring next season that have this card in it. From like humans with Boros. Let's get into number 3 on my list. Archdruid's Charm. Green. Search your library for a creature or a land, reveal it. If it's a land, put it into play tapped. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Then shuffle. Otherwise, put a counter on target creature you control. It deals damage to its power to target creature you don't control. Why doesn't that hit Planeswalkers? You kind of already revealed a new card that can hit Planeswalkers, and it's not a bite effect. I mean, it's not a fight effect, it's a bite effect. So Planeswalkers wouldn't be a huge difference, but you're probably down there like screaming at me like, it's already overly powerful and it's busted as is. Don't make it stronger. Also, exile target artifact or enchantment. So choose one. Of course, where I'm going to be trying this out right out of the gate is in ramp. Like, the deck already kind of wants to have Sunken Citadel and Castle Garrenburg. So if you can get one of those two, it's not required to have the other in your opening hand. So that really does like amplify how many keepable hands you could have. Because if once you get to a turn 2 Archdruid's Charm, if you have Grazer, or turn 3, pretty much you're guaranteed to be able to have a Sunken Citadel, most likely, and a Castle Garenbrig, to be able to get down to 6 or 7 drop the following turn. Then, of course, once you have that big fatty, and you don't need more lands, you could switch your gears, right? You could use it as an exile, an artifact, or enchantment, or have your creature get bigger and kill something. It's quite utility. The first mode helps you get to the last 2 modes. So it really works, I guess, hand in hand with itself. So, and even if you have 2 copies, right? You use the first one for ramp, and you use the second one. You either get a creature, have it be a removal spell. Oh, that is number 3 on my list. Let's get into number 2. Number 2 on my list is Leyline of the Guildpact. Hybrid, 4 hybrid, which all of them are green. So it does most likely will power up mono green devotion. The other possible home that I see this thing in is a deck that cares about the actual effects of this card. Mono green doesn't care about that. It just cares that it's 4 free green pips. Now, what deck would actually care about the other half of this card? For one, if somehow you're playing happily ever after, this kind of goes in it. Just saying, it makes all your cards all colors, so that kind of already enables a part of happily ever after. The other thing this card is for is, I think, Incarnation. So the deck plays Leyline Binding. This enables a Leyline Binding on turn 1. So that's quite powerful. So you literally play any untapped land, play this for free, putting on tap land, you got Binding up. So that's quite powerful in general. Now keep in mind, I think if you use Chain of the Rocks with this, if this thing gets destroyed, I'm pretty sure your Chain of the Rocks goes away because it's no longer a mountain. Don't at me in the comments, but if I'm wrong, let me know. Just don't be rude. I'm just kidding. I don't care. But I think this card actually is quite reasonable with Incarnation. Like I said, it is a 4-drop, so it can get you into Tolsimir, any of your 5-drops, Elish Norn, which is quite powerful in the mirror, right? And like I said, it enables a free, or basically almost free Leyline Binding early. So in that regard, I think this card is quite powerful in both of those decks. If there's any other decks outside of that, I'm not aware of, but those 2 decks alone should help drive the price out of this and make it Pioneer playable. Let's get into number 1, which is a card that I will not be featuring this season. Number 1 is No More Lies. Blue and a white. Counter target spell with the controller pays 3. If the spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. I hate blue-white. I'm not the first one. I'm not afraid to admit it. I would have been much happier if this was Dimir. But Dimir did not get a good card this set. Sorry, Dimir players, but the best deck in the format just got better. And I would not be surprised if blue-white control definitely dominates the meta going forward. And this card alone might bridge the gap with its worst matchup, which is Rakdos mid-range. Overall, this card is obscene. It's going to see a lot of play in Pioneer. Probably a full playset of copies. I would imagine Absorb is getting cut. The other cards getting cut is up for discussion. It probably makes more sense to cut your 2 Absorbs and 2 Dovin's Vetoes, move them to the board, and play 4 of these, because this is better in most matchups, right? Not every deck has a lot of non-creature spells. Overall, blue-white control keeps getting all the best cards in the last 5 sets. So what are you going to do? It's just going to keep getting better and better. And eventually it's going to be just light years better. I shouldn't say light years better, but it's definitely already better than most of the decks in the format. And it really has separated itself as the premier control deck. Me personally, if I do play control, it's Grixis. But, I got to play Nicol Bolas, which is a fun pet card of mine. But, oh man, if this would have been a Grixis card, or if there would have been a good Grixis counter, I would have That would have been good. But we got a nice Azorius counterspell. Is this card going to see any play outside of... is it going to make any new control decks or blue-white decks, right? Because most of the big blue-white deck you always see in leagues putting up results is always blue-white control. Is there another blue-white deck that could sprock from this? Is there a Jeskai control deck now? Because there's Lightning Helix with No More Lies. Is that a possible avenue? I want to know all these ideas and concepts down in the comment section. And until next time, where I think we're heading to the WoW West with Oko, I'm pretty sure is the next set. But that is when we get into the next top 10 video. I'm not going to do any other videos for this set. I think I covered every playable card for Pioneer in general. It took me a lot to even find honorable mentions in the set. Sadly, the set doesn't seem all that powerful. A lot of the mechanics, like the evidence, the payoff for doing the collective evidence was never really worth it. Of course, the cloak mechanic, paying 3 mana for a 2/2 just makes a lot of that whole mechanic bad. A lot of the uncommons outside of this, Lightning Helix and the Gruul one, really didn't look all that impressive. Like the Orzhov one is a standard card. The Dimir one is stone cold unplayable. And I guess the Golgari one is pretty reasonable. I'm going to be trying it out in a Desecrated Tomb deck like I did a while ago, like a year ago. I played the deck and it felt pretty good. I'm going to retry it with the brand new Golgari uncommon, but I wouldn't hold my horses up too much. I think it's going to be an okay deck, but I don't think it's going to be game changing anytime soon. But other than that, like I said, this set was definitely much weaker than LCI, where I basically did a top 20, I believe. And I still had a bunch of cards I wanted to talk about because the set was pushed. This set, it just isn't there this time. But Mana Leak in Pioneer is quite powerful. Said until next time, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, hit that bell notification so we alert for future videos, and hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.